On November the 12th, 1981, 2 men and 2 women boarded a 51-foot yacht called the Freedom 2.
No, not right.
They set sail from Sausalito, California. Their destination, Tahiti. The next day, in the early morning hours, 2 men struggled out of the icy Pacific Ocean at Stinson Beach, California, just north of San Francisco. One of the men had suffered a sprained ankle. The other ran for help.
And the bottom ripped out.
Another step
hey,
up.
Bob, are you okay?
He explained to rescue workers that the night before, he had sent out distress signals when their sailboat was hit by a large freighter.
Ripped out and they just fell out.
He and his 3 companions had clambered into a rubber raft they had on board, but the raft hit sharp rocks and was torn in half. The 2 women were lost. The man who spoke with the rescue workers gave his name as Bob Dozier. He said the injured man was John Russell, who had captained their yacht, the Freedom 2. The 2 missing women were Suzanne Russell, 30, wife of John Russell, and 20-year-old Kristen Tomlin, assumed to be Bob Dozier's girlfriend. The Coast Guard launched a full search of the waters in an attempt to find the 2 women or any remnants of the Freedom 2. Although they searched for several days, helicopters and Coast Guard vessels were unable to locate even a trace of either the women or the boat. What first appeared to be a terrible tragedy soon developed all the earmarks of a sophisticated scam. As the story unfolded, investigators began to suspect a complex plot in which both boats and people had changed identities. The boating accident that John Russell and Bob Dozier reported might have been an elaborate front for other, more sinister activities. The day after their accident, with a Coast Guard search still in progress, John Russell checked himself out of the hospital and left town with Bob Dozier.
I had investigated probably 200 to 300 boating accidents, most of them involving the death of loved ones. And I had never seen anybody that didn't show some grief, that showed some concern. Did a lot of accident investigations where people were from out of town. And in every case, a father or a mother or a husband or a wife would stay in town until it was absolutely sure that they knew where their loved one was. Mr. Russell and Dozier, on the other hand, they were gone within hours out of the San Francisco area. This made me very suspicious.
The next day, Coast Guard officials received a surprising telephone call.
And I'd like to clear up some information. I gave the Coast Guard, told them that there was 2 women on board. There was actually 3.
You're talking about the casualty to the Freedom 2, correct?
That's right.
Okay, could I get your name, please?
My name is John Russell.
And it was originally reported to us there were 2. Now it was 3 people on board that were lost?
There was 3 women on board, and I said there was 2. I was in shock. I was disorientated. There's a lot of things going on through my mind.
What was the 3rd woman's name?
Sherry Ann Dozier.
An infrared photography team was brought in to search once again for the yacht and for the missing women, now numbered at 3.
Okay, can we get in a little closer forward?
If a 51-foot boat had sunk in the area, infrared photography would almost certainly be able to locate the hull.
If the yacht would have gone down in that area, we were more or less certain that we would find a piece at least 20 feet long, and that was never found.
That same day, pieces of debris from the Freedom 2, each small enough to have been missed by the extensive searches, began to wash ashore. All the fragments were from non-vital parts of the Freedom 2.
Hey, there's a number on that.
The wreckage that we found did not appear to have been torn off by any force of nature. There were hammer marks on certain of the pieces that we found, Also, the pieces that we did find were not of the main hull. We finally came to the assumption, or we were 99% sure, that there really had not been a wreck of a yacht called the Freedom II.
No hull or major part of the Freedom II was ever found. There was absolutely no record of the distress signals Russell and Dozier claim they sent. And there was no record of the large freighter they said crashed into them. Hospital workers said that John Russell and Bob Dozier did not exhibit the extremely low body temperatures characteristic of prolonged exposure to 55-degree ocean water. The facts challenged Russell and Dozier's story of a tragically interrupted vacation cruise to Tahiti. Police investigated and found that the third woman Russell had reported missing, Cherie Ann Dozier, was in fact Suzanne Russell. The bizarre story began to unfold. John Russell married Suzanne in 1971. He claimed to be a convicted felon. In 1979, Russell and Dozier tried to open a saloon together in Virginia City, Nevada. Russell said his criminal record made him ineligible for the liquor license they needed. Dozier could get the license. Russell wanted to keep some control over the saloon, so he convinced his wife Suzanne to illegally marry his business partner Dozier. Suzanne Russell, alias Cherie Ann Dozier, was one woman with two identities and two husbands. Their saloon opened successfully. 2 years later, the threesome made plans to sail to Tahiti. They asked 20-year-old Kristen Tomlin, who had worked for them in their Virginia City saloon, to come along. On November the 14th, a life preserver from the Freedom II floated ashore.
Whereabouts did they find this?
It was discovered by the Coast Guard.
Well, that's the right area. Hey, look on the back side here. You can make out some letters here, it looks like. I can make out an A. I noticed a very faint name on the back side of the ring buoy. Letters on it that looked like they'd been sun-bleached out. I could only make out a few letters, so I called the U.S. Customs Office, and they did some of their fancy photography work and used some chemicals on it, and brought out the name Mauna Kea.
Authorities immediately began to question whether the Freedom II was in fact the Mauna Kea, which had been reported lost at sea. They also thought it might be another yacht, the Inspiration, which had been reported stolen and looked exactly like the Freedom II. During the week of November 15th, plastic bags and drug paraphernalia washed ashore near the place Russell and Dozier had surfaced after their alleged shipwreck. Now, the Coast Guard began to suspect that they had only scratched the surface of some vast labyrinth of criminal activity.
My opinion is that Russell and Dozier, although they were dealing with trying to transit drugs to another country, and that in itself is against the law, they were such crooks that they dreamed up this scam to fake a boat accident, throw some debris over the side, make the owners of the drugs think, in fact, the boat did go down, and Russell left with a $250,000 yacht and $5 to $6 million worth of drugs. His wife, Suzanne, was well known to be a good sailor. She could have sailed it just as easily to another port where in a week or so, John and Bob Dozier joined them again.
The story of the missing Freedom II and its 4 occupants is a confusing one. All 4 of them may be innocent, but the authorities believe there are other possibilities. If it is a simple case of boat and insurance fraud, they may be guilty of a felony. Authorities believe that they might be guilty of drug trafficking, and with 2 women reported lost at sea, even murder. A key question becomes, how does Kristen Tomlin fit in?
If we ever find Dozier and Russell, it would be because of Kristen Tomlin. I felt so strongly in early '82 that she would surface, and she has not surfaced, that I don't think that she's with us anymore.
The Freedom 2 and its 4 occupants disappeared 7 years ago, and they may look very different today. John Russell, who also uses the alias John Farrell, is missing. Bob Dozier, who uses the alias Michael Hayes, is missing. Suzanne Russell, alias Cherie Ann Dozier, is missing. Among them, they have already used a total of 21 known aliases. Kristen Tomlin is also missing. Any of these people might be living under a new assumed name. John Russell and Bob Dozier are currently charged with grand theft insurance fraud. The 2 men were reportedly sighted in Hawaii, but rumors persist that Russell may be living in Oregon or Florida under the name of Don Smith. The sightings of a boat resembling the Freedom 2 have also been reported in Hawaii and Acapulco. Also in a recent broadcast, we examined the strange case of John Russell and Bob Dozier, who left San Francisco Bay on a yachting trip and later disappeared. They are now wanted for grand theft insurance fraud. On November 12, 1981, Russell and Dozier boarded a 50-foot yacht called the Freedom 2. With them were 2 women, Russell's wife Suzanne and 20-year-old Kristen Tomlin, assumed to be Dozier's girlfriend. The 2 couples set sail from Sausalito, California. Their destination, Tahiti. The next morning, John Russell and Bob Dozier struggled to the shore at Stinson Beach, California, just north of San Francisco. Dozier told authorities that the yacht had collided with a large freighter and that the 2 women were lost at sea. The day after the accident, while the Coast Guard searched, John Russell and Bob Dozier left town. Within a week, they disappeared. The bodies of Suzanne Russell and Kristen Tomlin have never been found. Update, Ontario, Canada. Bill and Betty Rochard watched our program and recognized John Russell, Bob Dozier, and Suzanne Russell as 3 people who had stolen their boat in 1982.
After seeing them on Unsolved Mysteries, I'm positive that John Russell is John Smith as we knew him, Bob Dozier is Bob Johnson as we knew him, and Susan Russell is Anne Christine Smith.
In 1982, the Rochards sold their boat to Anne Christine Smith, who they now believe was Suzanne Russell, the same woman who was supposedly lost at sea 1 year earlier. Bob Dozier and the Russells allegedly stole the Rochards' boat after paying only 10% of the purchase price. For 6 months, the Rochards tracked their boat from port to port, finally catching up with it in Fort Pierce, Florida. A court ordered that the boat be returned to the Rochards and issued a judgment of nearly $48,000 against Anne Christine Smith.
Even though we had a judgment against them, it didn't do us any good because these people had disappeared.
In 1983, John Russell and Bob Dozier were reportedly seen in Kemah, Texas, near Galveston. In 1986, they were rumored to have been on the Hawaiian island of Kauai, and Suzanne Russell may have been with them. If you have any information about this case, please call our toll-free number, 1-800-876-5353. Update. Bob Dozier has been captured. In April of 1991, Bob Dozier was arrested in Hawaii and brought to stand trial in Los Angeles. Dozier pleaded guilty and served a 6-month jail sentence. John Paul Russell was captured by the FBI in June of 1993. Both men deny any knowledge of the missing women. 42A.